Hi, and welcome back to This Week in Voice, Season 4, Episode 4. My name is Bradley Metrock. I'm CEO of a company called Score Publishing based in Nashville, Tennessee. Our sponsor for Season 4 of This Week in Voice is Microsoft, and we greatly appreciate their support of the show. We appreciate what they do for the tech community at large. Specifically, Microsoft will be giving what we're calling the Microsoft keynote at Project Voice, which is the #1 event for voice tech and AI in America, coming the week after CES. And they will be talking about a number of things there. If you want more information on that, go to projectvoice.ai. If you want more information about Microsoft in general, go to Microsoft.com. We appreciate everything they do for us and everything they do for the voice community in general. With that, we are very pleased to have two phenomenal guests on the show. Looking forward to both these folks. Our first guest is Susan Hura. Susan, say hello.
Hey, Bradley. Hey, everybody.
Susan, thank you for joining us. Take a minute. Tell us who you are, what you do, who you're with.
Sure, absolutely. So I am currently serving as CEO at Banter Technology. We help clients create powerful, intuitive voice interactions for their customers. I am a linguist by training, and I've been fascinated by computer speech recognition specifically, but speech technologies in general, since I was a teenager. That is so nerdy, but it actually is true. So my work over the past 20 years or so has been around strategizing, evaluating, designing, and doing training around conversational design.
Very cool. And we greatly appreciate you being part of this with us. Your partner in crime in some ways is here. Phillip Hunter, we are pleased to have you on the show. Say hello.
Hey, Bradley. Thanks. It's really great to be on, and I appreciate it. Going to have some fun.
Thank you very much for being here, Phillip. And take a minute, same thing as Susan. Tell us who you are, tell us who you're with, tell us what you do.
Yeah. So Phillip Hunter, as everyone listening has probably figured out already. And so I, right now, am a senior principal designer on the conversation design team at a company called 24/7 that provides customer contact center solutions, which is interesting for me because it's kind of a return to where Susan and I both got started in this field in sort of the current age of speech recognition technologies. We worked together at a company called Intervoice a long time ago and started some of the first major enterprise-focused speech recognition application projects and really learned a lot then that we're excited to bring forward into this new age of Google Assistant and Alexa and Cortana and all the rest. And speaking of them, I spent several years at Microsoft, worked on some of the early Cortana efforts, and then moved over to Amazon. And after some time at AWS, I also worked on the Alexa Skills Kit and oversaw some of the initial developer tools and things like blueprints coming out the door there. So, and like Susan, I've been a passionate advocate for using great design techniques and methods in conversation design. And that's really one of our big focus areas is how do we keep the user-centered design, human-centered design growth going in this field.
Excellent. Thank both of y'all for joining me and our audience today. And before we get too much further, I want to talk about y'all's collaboration. You are in the process of creating, you have created a new conference called Points Made. Either one of y'all or collectively, tell us about that.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, great. Go ahead, Susan.
Well, no, I was going to say you start.
Well, both of us, like I said, both of us have been passionate about design and conversation design in particular. We both have studied various aspects of human behavior outside of the software world, and and through that, bring a lot of, I guess, care really about how we are enabling humans to speak with machines and get things done effectively, whether it's something as mundane as checking your bank balance or something more complicated around handling medical management in the home. And so one of the things that we've seen, there's lots of great conferences like yours, Bradley, and others that give a lot of visibility to the entire growing industry around voice. What we are trying to do as well is raise the level of, forgive me, conversation around conversation design specifically. Up until recently, Susan and I were part of a very, very small group of people globally who could address conversation design effectively. And as Google Assistant and Alexa and others have really exploded, we've known that there's an ever greater need for people with our skill set. And there's also a need for a place to talk about the issues more deeply than just reviewing applications. It's great to have case studies and things like that, but we need to dig into the sorts of issues that designers really have to have a handle on to make this new movement the success it can be. Anything you want to add, Susan?
Well, yeah. You got to it at the very end. I just kind of want to expand on this idea of being able to delve deeper. That was really a primary motivation, really, for both of us. There are issues that at the existing venues that are out there that either weren't being discussed at all, or that are discussed in a way that we felt was not deep enough. So the ability to not just look at the how to do good conversation design, but to look at psychological factors, social, cultural, emotional factors that all impact these automated conversations that we're trying to build. That for me was really one of the primary things. Another goal for us, though, was to try to bring some other voices into this conversation that we're creating. So because we've been such a small insular group for many years, and that now there's this growing set of people who are designing these conversations, there's a tendency for us to spend a lot of time talking back and forth to each other. So it's been a big motivation for us to find people who can contribute meaningfully to these conversations that we're having about designing conversations, but who aren't direct practitioners in the field. So we have got some folks who are coming in who are journalists, whose beat is covering voice and conversational technologies, or at least that's part of what they cover. We've got linguists who are going to be there. We really think that bringing in voices, from academia, from the journalism world, will help sort of spark some of those conversations that we don't see happening so far.
Yeah, and then one last thing to note is part of that is tackling the bigger issues that are part of the software industry in general, especially around how much of our life is spent interacting with mobile devices and on your laptop, and now you've got other voice devices in your home, and now there's a lot of concern around privacy and bias in the technology and these sorts of things. So how do we start taking that into consideration and even trying to address it? So that's kind of a big overview there. Points made. It's a forum. It's a conversation, and versus just a general conference. And it's going to be happening in the first part of June, so early June of next year, in Minneapolis, and we'd love for anybody and everybody to join us.
Yeah.
No, that's
Yeah.
great.
Yeah. And really, I mean, Bradley, this is why we were part of why we were so excited to come on and talk with you is that so I was involved in producing the speech tech conference for a bunch of years. And the thing that I noticed in that time is that the very best parts of the conference were those conversations that happened right after a presentation finished. You know, those ones that you're tying up the room and the next speakers can't get in. And so you have to take those conversations into the hallway and it keeps going. What we're trying to do deliberately is elevate those conversations as part of points made. So we really feel like our attendees are absolutely as important as the people who we have up there on stage giving the presentations. So we really do intend this to be a dialogue. So that's why we were so thrilled, because we know the quality of people who pay attention to this podcast.
Well, I appreciate both of y'all being on, and what you're doing is it's just what the doctor ordered. You know, we've got a lot of room for a lot of different types of events here. And, you know, the stuff that y'all are doing, you are original voice OGs, you know, and so people need to hear from you, and you know, this forum that you put together, it just looks like an excellent, authentic, unique type of experience. We're going to link to it in the show notes, so people will be able to find it there. And follow them on Twitter. We're going to link to their Twitter account. We won't. It's like at Points Made Forum, I think is what it is.
That's right.
And
Yep.
so we'll link to that. No need to write that down. You can just go to the web, and we'll have that linked as well after the show. So yeah, excellent job. And just to put a button on that, once we saw what Susan and Phillip are doing with Points Made, we were like, look, y'all need to come and talk about this even more at Project Voice. And so we've got both of these fine folks joining forces to give what we call the contrarian talk at Project Voice on why voice tech sucks. I will be in the audience for that. I can't wait to hear that. We're really, really pleased to have you all on the show, and just pleased to have you see everything and be part of what you're doing. So thank you very much for that.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. Thanks for the opportunity to Project Voice too.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and you see us both grinning like crazy here around the contrarian talk. When you first gave us the invitation, Bradley, the thing I said is, you couldn't have picked two more natural skeptics than the two of us. So, and watch out for my buddy here, because he's known to do some theatrical things in presentations.
I might.
Bring it.
You know, but I want to emphasize, you know, the reason we're doing Points Made, and the reason we're so excited about joining you and everyone else in January, is that we really do believe that there is so much promise and so much to be gained and so much benefit that can be provided with this technology. We just really want to see it done well. And you know, we've learned a lot of lessons in technology, especially over the past 10 years with the explosion of mobile. And then Susan and I have lots of lessons that we've learned, many of them the hard way, I should say, by making the mistakes that we can help accelerate. You know, I'd like to see voice in some way, you know, have a different and better growth path than mobile. And you know, but it takes a lot of work and dedication and focus to get there.
Well, and it takes people willing to be honest and candid and transparent.
Yeah.
And that's necessary, and that's what y'all are doing. So keep your eye on Points Made. Keep your eye on these folks. We'll link to this stuff so you can start to follow it. That's a great way to kick off the show and precede. Well, I should say, with that, we're going to get to the news. And Story Zero. We don't normally have a Story Zero. In fact, I think this is probably the first time in 4 seasons we've had a Story Zero. And so this week, Voicebot.AI turned 3 years old, and it's a whining.
Congratulations!
Yeah, we'll get to that. Voicebot.AI is a whining toddler among us. We have anyone who listens to the show knows, really, I think it was from the latter part of season 1, we installed the Voicebot.AI story of the week. We did that because we were bored. No, I'm teasing. Voicebot.AI has shown over and over and over and over and over again its worth to the community. It sells it far short to call it the #1 site for voice and AI news and commentary. It's far more than that. And the work that Brett has done is remarkable. And with that said, what we're going to do at Project Voice, and this is the announcement, is that after we have present the awards that are part of the Project Voice Awards Gala, the second half of that evening will be the roast of Brett Kinsella.
I love it.
And we got a special graphic that our team has cooked up specifically for this that we'll put on the web at 8 p.m. tonight, and it'll go out in an email tomorrow. And we do have some roasters confirmed. Ava Muchler, who is his colleague and co-founder, will be one of the
Yeah. Nice.
a gentleman named Ron Crone, one of the
we know Ron.
Okay.
will be one of the roasters. A gentleman named Pete Erickson,
we know Pete.
Summit, will be one of the roasters.
That's
and because we found we couldn't get enough humans to say yes, Homie and Lexi of the Homie and Lexi podcast will also be one of the roasters. We have many more to come.
Oh, awesome.
But those 4 are confirmed. I will MC it, and it's going to be a fun time. It's going to be a memorable time. Ultimately, it will honor the work that Brett has done, his team has done with Voicebot.AI. But before that, we'll have some fun with it. And there will be a separate, I believe the way it will work, we're still working this out, is I believe there will be a separate fee for that dinner, like around $80 or $90 or something. And that will go to the charity of Brett's choice. So details will be forthcoming on that. But that will be, that's must. Oh, I left one roaster out. How could I leave out Brandon Kaplan, a skilled creative? So Brandon Kaplan will be one of the roasters as well. So we've got other people that the invitation is extended to, and other people, perhaps the 2 of y'all might be interested in this. We're turning over all stones for who wants to skewer this guy, but it's gonna be, so that is our announcement, and we're happy about it.
I think it sounds like it's going to be an epic evening. I think people are going to be talking about this one. Yeah.
It'll be fun. And so I appreciate y'all allowing me to start off with this. And then it's fitting that story number 1 is it's probably some of the most hard-hitting journalism that Voicebot.ai has done. It's a story about Oreos. And
you know what they say about cookies and crumbling.
This is true. So getting into story number 1, this is kind of interesting. The title of the article is Oreo releases Alexa skill for mystery flavor challenge. And I think it's interesting to pose this to the 2 of y'all who have been around voice as long as you have and have seen it sort of grow, that this, I could see this going either way. Maybe you see this as a sign of just how far it's come, or maybe you see this as a sign of, hey, we took the wrong turn somewhere. Susan, I'm going to start with you. Your thoughts with this particular article, anything strike you about this marketing arrangement or anything about this?
Yeah, so I think that there's every possibility that this mystery Oreo flavor skill may do what Oreo is intending, right? It may achieve their goals. People have shown that they've got the willingness, for something new and funny and fun to go ahead and jump in and try out a new skill like that. And I think that's actually a fine use of the technology. I guess I have concerns also, but I guess I'll let Phillip jump in and say what he thinks, because I think we're going to say the same thing around or similar things around what's the concern with these sort of small one-off skills like this that are, directly marketing related?
Yeah. I'll start though by saying, we're still in this time of amazing experimentation.
Yeah.
And brands and individual developers, multi-billion-dollar companies, and somebody who's just trying to build something for her family, are all out there experimenting, and they have been since the early days of Google Assistant and Alexa, and so I love that there's still this willingness to experiment and figure things out to see what works, and I think none of us feel like we've really cracked the nut on expanding or finding sort of that, to use an old mobile phrase, that killer app to expand beyond some of the core things that people love to do with their in-home assistants. But getting to this sort of engagement around a brand is something that I know many people are interested in and have pursued already. And I think a game is always fun, right? It's something where there's guessing, and there are interesting things about choosing to just do that versus sort of provide general information. But let me give that back to you, Susan, and you can dive into a little bit of the things that brands should think about as well, besides the engagement factor.
Well, yeah, and it's funny that you said choosing to do a fun thing with this app rather than general information. I think that's where this breaks down a little bit. Like, I have never once felt the need to get information about Oreos that I couldn't read on the package. And I got teenagers at home. Sure, we go buy the new flavors. We're into all of this, but there's ways in which I'm really echoing the thing that you said, Philip, around where is this ultimately going, right? I don't think we need general information about Oreos or lots of other things. And so there's a way in which I think these super targeted marketing type skills, there's not a ton of places to go with them. I mean, most of the stuff that people are really using smart speakers for, I mean, the top 3 or 5 use cases are almost always the same, right? Use it to play media play audio, control your TV, stuff like that. Set timers, ask about the weather, ask about traffic, those kind of general information kind of questions. And it's hard, I think, to come up with a long-lasting strategy of why I would want to talk to my smart speaker about Oreos.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's even funny to have that sentence be something we say, but it is it's a thing, and we all know that these sorts of conversations happen in the home with the people who live there. If you're a parent, you've at some point had an at-length conversation about what your kid eats, and so the idea that we talk about these things at home is makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
It's is there a reason we turn to an assistant device to do that? And but at the same time, I think that this was Amazon's part of Amazon's strategy, is that they have had this massive outreach to developers, large and small teams since the early days, and one of the things that they explicitly wanted to do was just get a lot of activity out there to see what starts bubbling up. And I think in some ways we're still in that. And of course, I grew up in the days where I think it came out first when I was a kid, was the whole what's under the bottle cap marketing strategy for soft drinks, and I don't even know if that's still a thing, but there's find these codes or get these prizes, and of course there you're interacting directly with the packaging of the product, so it's a little bit different, but it's still just this idea of mind share and engagement over time. And so I'm very curious to see. When I was reading the blurb about it, one of the things that I noticed was that part of the interaction is to drive people to the website as well, so they can submit guesses about the flavor. And I think that that strikes me as an interesting choice about why not make that part of the interactive experience on in the skill as well. Although maybe I'm misreading that, and it is. But I think part of the challenge we have right now is how do we, and I see digital teams at brands struggling with this, is like, how do they use this new channel, this new medium? They've got very mature digital practices around web and mobile, and of course decades long in advertising and of all sorts, and just how does that all translate? And for some teams, it's going to mean rethinking elements of the strategy. And for others, the announcement from the BBC last week or the week before about doing their own digital assistants, I think that's just fantastic. This idea that a team would want to go that deep on something, when they're, they've already got a great presence on the different services, but now to really explore and push the boundaries. And it'll just be fascinating to watch what they learn, and then there will be a lot of things that brands can take from that, I don't know, I'm beginning to blather, but it's a really interesting time.
Well, I'm on your page because I'm on both your pages, because I think it's work that Voicebot has done, as well as some others that have shown, look, it's a solid 70% or around that number of people engaging with smart speakers and voice assistants for weather or music.
Right.
And that's someone's got a book coming out along those lines. The name of my book is called More Than Just Weather and Music, 200 Ways to Use Alexa. And, these marketing folks, it's been interesting to see Amazon because you're right. They're all struggling with how do we take advantage of the fact, how do we take advantage of this totally unexpected and newfound ubiquity of voice assistants and smart speakers. And I don't know how you even begin to answer that question without knowing what everybody's doing and what has been done.
Right.
And that's where I see Amazon has made numerous excellent moves, which is why we're even having this discussion in the first place.
Right, sure.
But one thing that I think that they have not done effectively is market and promote the best use cases. Now, I'm sure they would argue because they've got, their dev evangelism team does a great job, and they've got a blog, and they've got this email they put out on Friday nights with these different things, and they've got these different tools in the toolkit. But it hasn't added up, my opinion, to enough oomph to where it has pushed the customer level of understanding, the mainstream level of understanding, to where, hey, you've got the Wayne Investigation, which is a game that sparked their entire shift into games.
Right.
You've got all these different music games on there. You've got different things that kids can use, and they're non-threatening, like Pikachu Talk is one of them. You've got all sorts of different things going on, like Kids Court. I mentioned a lot of games. If I wanted to get into brands, you could easily do that too. There's so many different interesting things that have gone on that exist now for the ecosystem, and they just haven't been, the gospel has not been received yet on that. And, maybe, I know that people who find out about this book I'm putting together will enjoy it for that reason, but there's other sources for that information, and people need to go find them. One side note about this Oreo thing before we move on, it's interesting to note that this is not a normal Alexa skill. This is, you don't even enable it. They just bake it on in to the Alexa experience, to where you simply start asking about Oreos or the mystery flavor or whatever, and it's going to start telling you stuff. Yeah. And it's interesting. I would love to know what the relationship is between Amazon and Oreos, to where they got that special status.
Yep. Well, it's not the first one that's done that. There was, and it probably still is, a similar arrangement with All Recipes, where they they do have a standalone skill, but they also power some of the responses that are given when you simply ask Alexa for a recipe. And so, and in some cases, there's attribution. I found this from allrecipes.com, et cetera. But I think that is a really interesting area that, I know that when I was there was a lot of discussion about it. I'm sure there still is, about where is that line, or where does it cross over from, what we used to call first party capability, which has tended to be very generalized things like weather, music, tying into other Amazon services, and then the other extreme, you had, they're just a platform, and anybody can put nearly anything out there on it. But now we're starting getting into these blended areas where, there's clear collaboration, because everybody knows that Amazon sells Oreos, but they don't make them. And
right.
So, yeah, go ahead.
Don't you think, though, that's a natural way forward? Because, Bradley, I started thinking this when you were talking about how, everybody needs to know what everybody else is doing in order to really create effective experiences. And I think that's always been true with technologies, different technologies to a certain extent, but because you're always talking to the same smart speaker, right? Mm-hmm. And you have to invoke that speaker by name. You're always talking to the same someone in those cases, even if it's a third party skill or app that you're putting out there. It's going to a certain extent, feel to that end user like this is still a conversation I'm having with Alexa. So I think that impact of everyone else in the ecosystem will have, hopefully it'll have positive, raise all boats kind of effects, but it can have negative ones too, right? So if there are skills out there that don't work well, users can start to have expectation that, oh, I can't say something like this when I talk to Alexa. And we know that's how users work, right? They're not going to attribute it to that specific skill. They just know I'm talking to Alexa, and when I try this kind of thing, it doesn't work. So I think it's all super important there.
And I think it dovetails well into the next story, and so we'll transition to that. Great commentary all the way around on. It is funny we're talking about Oreos. Oreos have come up a lot over the last year or two. Won't go into any other reasons, but it's come up unexpectedly. Put it that way. Story number 2: Amazon to announce new hardware during September 25th event. So they're doing this again for the 3rd year, I believe, and then Google counters with a competing event that they're doing on October 15th. And as a separate side note, we include kind of an interesting note Voicebot.AI reported on. Google Assistant will stay on hold for you now on the phone, which is kind of interesting. But the question I want to pose, and Phillip, I'm going to start with you, is number one, two parts. Number one, what are you hoping to see as the cumulative result of these two competing events, just for voice in general? What are you hoping to see or maybe not see out of these two events collectively? And then the other part of the question is, I always like to do a periodic sort of heat check on this. Do you perceive that Amazon and Google are neck and neck in this voice landscape, or do you perceive as one having a clear advantage, be it along any metric you choose, market share or functionality, whatever you pick? Do you perceive them as being equals for the most part, or do you perceive one as having a profound advantage of the other heading into these dueling meetings?
Yeah, thank you. So to tackle the first part of that, one of the things I'm hoping not to see is further splintering in the types of devices that are being offered. And now we had the show came out, and people had a little bit of confusion about that, but the fact that it was easier to set up than say Alexa on your Fire TV device or something like that. And the screen is reasonably nice for watching little videos or seeing news stories and things like that. But then you had the Spot, and they went with the round aesthetic, and it was rightly called a very expensive alarm clock because it was aimed at sitting by the bedside. And then they put out a rectangular version of that, and now we've got things for the automobile, and we still have our original Echo Tower and Echo Dot, and what I'd like to see is some deeper integration, I think, into the home. At my home, we don't like a lot of clutter. And we're not neat freaks. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but we're not over the top about it. We just like to kind of not have a lot of stuff everywhere. And as you might imagine, both of us worked at Alexa. We have multiple devices around the home. We use smart home technology as well. And at some point, there's this weight of having that in the home, and meaning that it becomes more burdensome than beneficial, or the ratio is off. And so what I really would like to see is things that feel more like the way we typically think about additions to our home, things that are really beneficial to us, that feel like they add to our aesthetic, add to our emotional appeal of being in our home. So that's short on specifics of like what I'd like to see from a technical standpoint, but I think there's that emotional. We've established that people want to use these technologies. Now let's figure out how we make them feel more comfortable, feel more beneficial. The second part of your question, the second question, I think I don't really have something new to say there, unfortunately. I wish I did. I think that there's just still such alignment with each provider around their core strategy. Amazon has been an absolute relentless experimentation machine around retail. And so there's a lot of push. You don't see, they have AWS, of course, and so they've got this whole technology support and provision side of the business, but you don't see much of that coming through except for the developers in the Alexa ecosystem. And I see them, adhering to that. So there's, it's about content, it's about purchasing, it's about entertainment, things like that. Google has stayed really, close to their core of information sharing that may or may not be sponsored, and they're really good at that, right? There's very few people who use any other search engine these days, and then you look at Siri and Bixby and others, and those are kind of serving those ecosystems as well. And so what I think is, and one of the reasons I was excited about the BBC is to start to see organizations stepping out of that strict alignment and start to say, okay, what, free of a core focus like retail or search, what does a voice assistant do? What do they mean to people? And how can they be more beneficial without having to lean on something inside the platform ecosystem? So are people ahead of each other? Oh yeah, I'm sure, market share tells some stories there. But what I haven't seen yet is, I guess, I'll call it, for lack of a better word, sort of platform unification, or really cross-platform visions about how these technologies do things for people that don't have to come with the weight of, search more, buy more, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Excellent. Susan, same question for you. One, what do you want to see out of these dueling events? And then, do you perceive Amazon or Google being neck and neck, or one being above the other? Your thoughts?
Yeah. So the first one around expectations, I can't say that I have any particular wants of what I would see out of those particular events. I mean, I tend to not be super focused in on like the hardware itself. I can certainly agree with a lot of what Phillip said there. That making it easier to integrate, to have overall experiences using your voice in the way that consumers seem to want to do it throughout the home. It would certainly be, I think, a great step in the right direction. And, in terms of the two organizations, so I'm coming at this from my Banter technology perspective. We've worked with both of them, getting voice apps up on the two different platforms. And, from a technical perspective, in terms of what it's like to put an app up on the two different ones, there are some differences. There are things about working with the two companies that can be quite different from between Amazon and Google. And I do think that there are some core strengths and weaknesses, at a performance level. Anything I'd say about, is one ahead of the other would frankly be quoting things I read on Voicebot.AI. So I don't have a particular sense about that. I guess I'm still, like I'm sure a lot of people, waiting, because there's something that feels right now a little bit untenable about having these two main disparate platforms, where the requirements are a little different and the way you work with them is just a little bit different. It almost sort of feels like those, oh my God, I'm dating myself here, VHS and beta, days where it's like there are these two different ones and they're not compatible, and which one do you want, or do you do both? It's kind of the same sense right now, I think.
Completely agree. Yeah, we kind of are in the VHS and beta sort of thing going on, just with in a weird, different and weird sort of way, but there's a lot of analogs back to that. No, I think that's excellent. Thank both of y'all for that commentary. So in the interest of time, we got two more stories. The next one is about Apple, and it's a real propaganda type of piece. Celebrating Apple's Apple's excellence. I don't know what word to use for this. I decided to include this anyway because it has some important things in here, like Apple has decided to attend the conference and promote their work involving language processing and things like that. And that really is profound. I want to challenge both of y'all, and Susan, I'm going to start with you and then Phillip. Let's play, because I want to spend more time discussing the last article rather than this one. Let's play word association with this article. And Susan, I'll start with you.
Okay.
So this article talks about how great Apple is and wow, how amazing, and they were at a conference and all this stuff. In 1 year's time, what word would you use or short phrase to describe Apple's position in the marketplace relative to where it is now? Better, worse, the same?
Yeah. Okay. Same.
Okay.
I didn't read anything that would make me feel like anything is going to be dramatically different.
Completely agree. Phillip, your thoughts, just better, worse, same, where's Apple going to be?
So really just focusing on sort of our core topic here around assistance and voice and stuff, I think we'll have a better Siri. That's what I think we'll have in a year. Siri lagged. It had such a head start. I was at Microsoft when it came out. We were all just astonished that Apple had produced something that we felt we were somewhat close to, but not, and it's such a great splash, and so many really innovative things that they did with that, the first iterations, and then it just kind of, I don't know, it got ignored, is the way it looks from the outside. So I think in a year, I'm hoping with this sort of thing, we'll see a better Siri. I don't think it'll change much of anything else. I mean, maybe, integrations with Apple TV or other, parts of the ecosystem, like, you Siri on your laptop and stuff like that. But I don't think it'll change much else.
We're in complete agreement. And that's honestly, that's probably the amount of time that story merits discussing.
The AI article is interesting. I could talk about that a little bit. Just the name of the AI program too is kind of, it's a little creepy, but
well, let's get into this. And we'll close with this. So story number 4, Oracle unveils AI voice for the enterprise. And this was a sort of a late developing story. When did this come out? Yeah, Tuesday, when I was putting this stuff together. And Phillip, I'm going to start with you. It sort of dovetails with what you were talking about with the BBC a little bit. Tell us, how this article struck you, what you took away from Oracle specifically, and maybe in a larger sense.
Yeah, so 2 pieces of background information that probably most of our listeners today don't have. One is I know Oracle has made a number of investments in design and usability and things to really enrich their user experience, which they've been known for poorly for a long, long time. No one has ever accused Oracle software of being easy to use. And secondly, Susan and I both know we have a industry colleague who we both respect,
yes,
who is there now, and specifically for voice. So this twin investment of much better user experience focus and hiring real experienced, really well experienced people for voice, I think bears some really interesting possibilities. And obviously Oracle has a massive investment in data and infrastructure and enterprise software. So the promise there, from that set of ingredients is amazing. Of course, it has to be carried out, and that's where things always get interesting. But knowing the people that I do that are there, I'm pretty optimistic that we're going to see some interesting outcomes here. And I do think that when Alexa for Business launched a few years back, there was a lot of excitement about that. I think that aspect of using voice software has also been underexplored. in part because people got attached to easy things like meeting setup. Not that that's not an expensive thing for a lot of enterprises, but it's almost verges on gimmick rather than saying here's a real tool that I'm going to use in my day-to-day work. Anyway, yeah. So let me turn that over to Susan for her additions.
Yeah. So like you said, I've got a ton of respect for the folks who Oracle's brought in to do this project. And the reason that I think that I also feel optimistic is that doing something like this, right, really bringing voice as a tool for the enterprise is something that it's going to take a team effort. This is not a couple of designers by themselves and they'll get it all figured out. No, this is going to take some massive organizational stuff. And so in addition to being really positive in terms of their capabilities around design, we also know that our colleague there is a great manager and is great at cultivating a team like that. So I feel really positive there. The other thing that I feel really positive about in terms of voice in the enterprise altogether is I love that as a use case for one specific reason. It's because it'll have a focusing effect. So, kind of love that we're in the wild stage of experimentation, like you talked about, Phillip, but I love the idea of going deep on the specific use cases with the specific constraints that there are in terms of using voice within the enterprise. Because the thing that's beautiful about those more constrained use cases is that it forces the user experience team, so not just the voice team, right? But because it's never just a voice experience, right? There's always other modalities that are going to play in. But I think it forces those kind of constraints, force you as a user experience team to dig really deeply for the core principles that underlie what's going to make this sink or swim. And so I'm looking forward to what they might achieve, because I think there's going to be a ton for the rest of us in the ecosystem to learn from what they're doing. And I think that, the idea of the killer app has come up. This may not be killer, but it may be a seed in terms of a thing that really allows the rest of us to springboard off of what they may learn.
Excellent. Yeah, no, that's this is going to be an interesting one to watch. And I think as we head into 2020, voice in the enterprise, it's a focus of Project Voice, because yes, you've got the marketing people who are thinking about what is it that we need to be doing, but there's a lot of other things going on. There's people thinking about voice from an operational standpoint, and that's not only within every part of business. It's in the manufacturing line just as much as it is in the white collar office environment. And it's my perception that the feeling of talking about setting up meetings with voice, it feels a little gimmicky. It is gimmicky, number one, but it feels gimmicky because it's like the use cases haven't marched in lockstep with everything else. We've seen the devices explode. We've seen the interest explode. We've seen all of the major tech players hiring explode. And we've seen global interest explode. And as all of this has happened over the last 3 or 4 years, or 2 or 3 years, we're still talking about setting up meetings.
Yeah.
We're still talking about weather and music. So all of this stuff is happening, and yet we're still talking about, these use cases are the laggard. And so that is that's something that will change. Obviously, all three of us know that. But how it affects the enterprise, I think will be a major storyline for 2020. I appreciate y'all commenting on that. And any closing thoughts on any of this story or any other story here at the end?
Well, just one quick note that sort of touches on multiple things we've talked about, specifically the Oracle announcement. Where we need to go with the enterprise has to be stuff that, the question I ask myself is, what parallels the experiences that people do at home, which are very spontaneous, very natural, very sort of part and parcel of their day. Play some music, or what's the weather as I'm getting ready for work. One of the problems that we've had with everything that's available in these assistants is discoverability, and how do people know what's there? It's an invisible interface. It's very much an interface, but the invisibility of it lends itself then to being used for very spontaneous, sort of low-key things. Those things exist in the enterprise. And I don't just mean scheduling meetings or the mundane of tasks, but there are things that happen. And I think it's going to require companies like Oracle, who have the resources and the time and the deployed systems to go deep and figure these things out, because they're not the obvious things usually. They're things that have to be researched. So I want to see more of that, and so that's one of the things I'm optimistic about here. And the second thing I'll say is just that we have to figure out how to learn well as an industry. We have to learn about human behavior really well. We've got to go deeper, and that's part of the research as well. And because learning is going to make the AI part of this work, and without the learning, there is no intelligence. That's how intelligence is built.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll build on that, Phillip. So you're right. We need to go deep and understand the underlying behaviors. The way you go deep, there is a whole body of methods and practices around how you understand the needs that users have. How do we, as the providers of technology, understand and discover user needs, and then come up with a way to fix it? Up until now, so much of what's happening in this new conversational ecosystem is that old thing of, if we build it, they will come. Simply for the novelty factor, right? We've heard this story before. There was all kinds of stuff in the web world where this happened. But yeah, user research is how you go deep on this. But I'm still really positive. I think there are ways for us to move this forward. And I remain staunchly optimistic about what we can do with these technologies.
I think we all do, and that's a great note to end on. Phillip, Susan, thank you very much for sharing not just your time, but your expertise and your experience with me and the audience. It's greatly appreciated.
Sure thing. Thanks so much, Bradley.
Yeah, this has been terrific. Appreciate it.
Yep, and we're looking forward to Project Voice.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And we're looking forward to Points Made, and we will include the link for that as well, the link and the Twitter handle in the show notes for This Week in Voice, Season 4, Episode 4. Thank you for listening, and until next time.